Please welcome Roblox Vice President of Global Marketing, Neha Narang.
Hi, everyone. Please join me in welcoming back to the stage the one and only David Baszucki, aka Builderman. Hey. All right. So I have to say this is probably the most anticipated session of RDC, Builderman Q&A. So before RDC started, we asked all of you guys, what are your burning questions for Dave? And we also asked today during lunch, so I have all of those questions right here. So let's get started.
And I don't know what the questions are.
David does not know any of the questions.
Yay, and also I want to thank our marketing and DevRel for putting this thing on. It's absolutely amazing.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. And we're not done yet, so.
Okay, let's go.
So, well, first question's from me, actually. We just saw a video, and there was one big takeaway. This world is ours for the making. What does that mean to you?
I've tried to capture a bit of that in the opening keynote with the notion that this is a unique gathering of some of the most creative and imaginative people in the world right here, right now. And together, between that triad of our user base, all of these creative people, and the technology we're building, we really are inventing a whole new way for people to come together. So I don't think it's lip service. It feels real to me.
Well, I mean, one thing you said, right now and also in keynote, is how much we're growing. So our community's growing, not just by numbers, but by breadth of content and experiences. So what will the future be for large game studios and indie developers? How are we going to support both as both grow?
Yeah, I shared that one stat, which is really surprising, in that our biggest studios are growing, and our number 1,000 is growing, and our number 10,000 is growing, and all of this on top of it. I think the growth is going to continue in many dimensions. There's going to be a lot more diversity as we have older, younger people more around the world, which is going to be exciting. As I mentioned, we're going to have dedicated developers building educational content. We're going to have developers who focus 100% on music and entertainment. And someday we may have developers who are helping large corporations build out their 3D immersive digital office. So I think there's just so much future growth and diversity there.
One common question on as we grow that was asked among our community is also on DevX and raising DevX.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts there?
Woo!
I told you, these are the burning questions.
So for those of you that remember, I think we started pretty small with DevX, and we raised and we raised and we raised. And then we added engagement-based payouts, which has been very exciting. But I do want to share internally how we think about it. And we think about building the most vibrant, largest economy, most diverse collection of type of experiences. 50 to 60 million people a day are participating in that economy right now, either through App Store payments, through prepaid cards, through credit cards. That's just a pile of cash coming in. We are very, very fastidious in how we distribute that cash. As Dan and Manuel mentioned, we try to run the most efficient engineering team we can. We try to run the most efficient infrastructure we can. We try to run the most efficient safety and trust organization we can. And when we are done with that, we try to move absolutely as much of that cash to the developer community as we can. And for those of you that watch our Wall Street presentations and whatever, we are not making 40% profit. We are trying to move as much of that money back to you you can watch our Investor Day, and we will talk about the notion of more fueling growth and more fueling the developer economy. So we will give as much of it with the developer community as we can, and at some point, everything's on the table. Of course, DevEx, engagement-based payouts. We're trying to drive the size of the economy with advertising, so we are thinking about this a lot.
So just double-clicking on that and the developer economy, you mentioned in your keynote, and even now, so many other opportunities. What are all the ways that creators and developers can make money?
I can share the visionary ones, right?
Yeah.
We have a virtual economy with Robux. We have engagement-based payouts. We talked about ability, if you so choose, to put immersive advertising units in your experience. We've talked about both making a wonderfully optimized economy in our catalog. We've talked that ultimately that catalog will move in experience. Well, our hope is that all UGC purchases are in experience rather than in our catalog someday. For those, for the far out sci-fi view of this, one only need look at the real world and see the different ways things monetize. In the real world, we go shopping, we buy clothing, we do other types of things as well. I think we'll see all of those merge into immersive 3D platforms. So Roblox someday might be a great place to buy physical as well as virtual clothing, for example.
And how big of a role do you think ads are going to play in this equation for developers?
I think we are in a wonderful position where we're not driven by unnatural forces. We can grow the most amazing company in the world without advertising, and so it gives us an opportunity to do it in the right way, in a safe and civil way, in an ethical way. But I do think it's an enormous opportunity. And so just like other things we do at Roblox, we will make it better, we will iterate, we will do it in a systems way. We will be creating the first immersive 3D advertising platform. And I feel it's going to make the platform more fun, if anything.
So you shared this even now and at last year's RDC on how Roblox is powering a true virtual economy, where anything can be bought and sold online to offline. Our audience wants to know, will it really be possible to shop from Roblox and have it delivered in real life? Can I purchase food on Roblox and then have it delivered to my doorstep?
Oh, that's the one we've always talked about, right? Classics on Roblox, work at a pizza place. I mean, we've talked about that forever, where you get your physical and your digital pizza. Without giving ship dates, of course, we're talking theoretically here, I would say, of course. How could it not, right? How did we used to order pizzas? We used to have to go there. For those of you that you might not remember, you would order your online pizza by calling the pizza restaurant on the phone, and they'd say, "Oh, hey, this is so-and-so pizza. Would you like a pizza?" And you would enter that by a telephone. Then the internet came along, and everyone said, "You'll never have credit cards online. This will never work." And now we can't imagine calling the pizza. We go to whatever, DoorDash or whatever, and order that. So we're in that same phase right now where it's like, oh, it's crazy to imagine in 3D we'll go to work at a pizza place and order the pizza. But so I can't tell you when it will happen, but I'd be willing to bet and promise it will happen.
It'll be the norm, hopefully. So a big announcement we made was on experience guidelines, which is coming out very soon. And so with experience guidelines, will 13+ experiences risk getting less discoverability or engagement?
Yeah, once again, heard from Dan, heard from me, heard from Manuel about how much focus our teams are putting on discovery. I think it's going to go the other way. When we understand how old someone is, what they're interested in, there's such a diversity of our users. I think we're going to better align all of that. I don't see it at all being a penalty. If anything, this will be one of the additional signals we'll use to line up things with discoverability. I think you could imagine, well, I'll do better if I just make my thing all ages. And I don't think it's going to work that way. In the movie industry, we have a wide range of ratings. The market solves that. It's going to be exactly the same in our experience.
And the other side of that, alternatively, our 13 plus audience is growing so much. So how are we going to support and ensure that there's a lot of content for even this aged up audience?
Yeah, this goes back all the way to the day we released Roblox Studio. We, as I was talking about with Kevin, some companies are driven by innovation. They do big, hard things and they take a big leap. Releasing Roblox Studio was an innovation. We're just going to bet the whole company that the creators are going to build the content, not ourselves. We were validated in about 24 hours. For those of you that were there, I guess not many of you, that first day, we new and exciting creations. So yeah, I would bet the whole company that as our tools get better, as our economy gets better, as the creativity of our developers gets better, as search and discovery gets better, as our avatar system gets better, we will more than fill the desired content for those people. There will be so much opportunity. One way to think about it is if we had 10 times as many 17 and plus people on the platform, the economic opportunity would be quite attractive there. And I think we have a lot of savvy developers who know how to balance creativity and economy.
So now speaking of other announcements,
Yeah.
so of all the things that are coming out in studio, what are you the most excited about?
Wow.
You have to pick one.
So I'll be kind of funny. So there's enormous things coming out, and they're all like children. You love every one of them. So you really do. And you love the big visionary ones, the small itty-bitty ones, all of that. I'm really excited about the highest quality anti-alias fonts we can get in the studio user interface. And I think the reason is it shows we've got the heft to work on polish and quality. And I think there's an interesting phenomenon that if you have a 7-year-old car, not saying studio's like a 7-year-old car, by the way, but if you have a 7-year-old car and the windows are a little smudgy and the tires are, whatever, and it feels very different than your 7-year-old car where the oil's changed, it's brand new tires, it's sparkling clean, it's just like, let's go.
Yeah.
And so I do think the polish, I'm just excited about that because it creates a whole psychological mindset of the product. So
Is Studio going to come onto mobile?
I think, oh, good. Wow, who's asking this? It's great. So there's many ways to put Studio on mobile. It's built in a big desktop industrial user interface thing. We're building a product that 1,000 people could use. My own preference for the way Studio goes on mobile is Studio's cloud connected. Our cloud APIs are magnificent. Our cloud APIs are accessible in experience, in addition through Studio. And someone, maybe Roblox, maybe someone else can create a Roblox experience. We've seen a few versions of these that function as a Roblox Studio on mobile. So I would like us to bootstrap it, build a Roblox experience that is Roblox Studio that works on mobile.
So other advanced features, such as mirroring, non-uniforming scaling, and modeling that are available on third parties. What's your vision for Roblox?
Wow. Mirroring, I don't know if that means self-view or if that means portals with a camera or what it means. So I'll just guess what mirroring means, and maybe it means modeling, like mirror that. I think all of this, I'm assuming this will happen in two ways. Once, the Roblox modeler, the core CSG editor, we've got a great team working on it right now, and the future of the operations we can do, primitives, meshes, how they can be combined together. We're going to build a world-class engine that does that. We're unique in the engine we're building, that everything we build is more difficult because we're trying to make it run in real time. You saw the demonstration of the lathe. We've been talking about that for 10 years. We want real-time operations, which is much harder than static time. As we build out more and more incredible modeling type technologies, those feel almost pretty straightforward as operations. A studio plugin could be built on top of that. Hopefully, if we build that, and I'm sure we will, someday that would include the Lua source that might do that operation.
So you mentioned in Keynote, Roblox rendering is available across platform, mobile, desktop, console, and supports all of these, and even entering VR. What's next? How are we going to grow across all these platforms?
Yeah, so we have shared, we're in a unique position where growth happens on multiple directions. Those of you that, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, if there's 4 dimensions of growth, that's 16x headroom. There's probably more than 4 dimensions, but around the world, all ages, different types of use on our platform, learning, playing, and the economy. On the platform side, something really special happened. I forget how long it was ago when the very first iPhone came out, and there was a time when HTML was a PC Mac thing. You did not run the web on your phone. There's this different thing called mobile web, and it was crappy, and no one ever used it, and they had flip phones. And all of a sudden, with that very first iPhone, and then pinch and zoom, that one operation, it was mind-blowing. That same HTML content can now run anywhere. It can run on a PC, a Mac, or a phone. We take that for granted, and I feel our vision on immersive, 3D, simulated, avatar, digital cloud stuff is exactly the same. It will run anywhere, different user interface, different camera control. We made the leap from PC Mac to iOS Android at a time when many people thought, oh, that will never work. I remember we had giant debates in the company, that'll never work. Of course it's worked. Console, of course, tablet, of course. Early Oculus, and Oculus Quest is an obvious next place to go. PlayStation is an obvious place to go. And then the platforms even get more interesting, right? None of these are ship dates or promises. Switch is an interesting thing to think about. And then the living room is an interesting thing to think about. There are many experiences that I can imagine sitting on the couch with just my remote, not even a game controller, having some interesting things in that experience. So I think there's just a lot of room, and 3D multiplayer is so powerful, I think it'll ultimately run everywhere.
Even things that don't exist now.
That's right.
So challenge for developers right now is exploiters too. And they want to know, they're looking for external tools to deal with this. What are Roblox's plans to add more tools here? Or advice on how to deal?
Yeah, so Dan once again showed some of this. We're starting to take this more seriously. We've always taken it seriously. You can argue we didn't take it seriously when we first launched Roblox 15 years ago, where there's completely unimpeded bidirectional replication on the platform. And literally on a Sunday, I would say 1 in 10 experiences I went into had been hacked through the client. There was no floor. I was flying through the air. It was really bad. So we've made some progress, but we're not all the way there for automatic dealing with competitive gaming right now. There's a lot of techniques we can do. There's a lot of client-side hardening that we can look at. I think I'm ultimately hoping we have a combination of things, including the ability to dynamically go to server authority when we want to. We do a lot of client-side things now for latency reduction. When I was doing the demo with Kiran and Mahesh, by the way, great job, guys. That was awesome. Loved it. When I was doing that demo, my avatar was rendering locally, and that gave me immediate feedback, and that's super important. But I do think ultimately, if everything's server authoritative, it's a lot harder to cheat to some extent. So I think we'll come up with an interesting combination of these things. And we'll do it out of the box, so it works for everyone.
Well, speaking of the demo, which was just so cool and so amazing to see, identity, expression, communication is core to Roblox today and the future. So what is your vision for identity on Roblox and the role it will play in the future?
Yeah, identity is already important for all of us. We all bought all of our clothing. We all decided how to cut our hair. We all decided what shoes to wear. Like, for those of us that have hair, I'm looking at Dan. And we all make a lot of decisions around this. I think, just as I was talking about in education, sometimes there's more options in digital space than there are in physical space, with appearance, with how we present ourselves, with what we do. I feel whatever we can imagine we want to be digitally, we will be able to be. And we will have people working remote who can ultimately photorealistically be whoever they want to be. Because of that, it's almost interesting to imagine it'll be more a reflection of your identity because of the creative control we already show.
It'll be like your aspirational self, too.
Your aspirational self will really be able, and we already see that in that that very primitive Roblox avatar system initially was such a place to create, even with a lot of constraints. So there's going to be a lot of freedom there.
So while we all love how much evolution there's happening with our avatars, I mean, my daughter spends more time on our avatar than her real-life fashion any day. What does that mean for the classic avatar?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? That Roblox classic avatar, which when you think about it is so programmer art. It's so programmer art because the legs are 1 by 1 by 2, the body's 1 by 2 by 2, the arms are, I guess, 1 by 1 by 2, the head is that, the smile, I made in about 5 minutes on some cheesy paint program. It lasted for about 7 years, and now it's better and all of that. So what happened is that programmer art, as we grew, burned in a little as a look and feel for Roblox. Arguably side by side other things like the Lego minifig and things like that. And it's got its own unique look and feel. Juxtapose that with the future vision, Wreck-It Ralph, we are whoever we want to be. We have a huge range of avatars on the platform. In many social spaces, everyone comes as they are. In other social spaces, whether it would be Hello Kitty, Lego, The Incredibles, you name it, one can imagine them using amazing ML to take who you are and morph a bit for stylistic consistency. So if we were all in one of those worlds, I might still know it's you, but we all feel like we're part of that world. So we're going to see that wide range of it. And so ultimately, we have both of these things. We have this Roblox Classic and this vision of wide-ranging avatars. I think Roblox Classic will always be a preserved special part of Roblox. I can imagine there being a search or a sort for those experiences that are 100% Roblox Classic, and just the opposite. Everyone in there morphs into Roblox Classic, even if I'm a real photorealistic thing. So I think it's such a part of our fabric, it'll always be there.
And it's just the range is expanding. There's just so much more you can
Yeah, I think the way I would think about it is ultimately we'll have every avatar in the world. Yeah. Just as you might say The Incredibles, Lego, or Hello Kitty are special things owned by others, Roblox Classic will always be a Roblox special subpart.
So there's a lot of innovation happening with our avatars, also with voice and expression. So any plans to expand voice chat API?
Yeah, yes. We're just getting started. Roblox, in a sense, has the vision of being a cloud-based 3D simulation of the real world. And we talked about it forever. We want to be able to make a lumber mill. We want to be able to accidentally have a fire go off. We want to be able to build your go-kart, all of those things with your avatar. I think the same thing. So, yeah.
And with chat capabilities growing, we are growing.
I want just one final. I think the ultimate extension of this is there's enormous research to be done in the 3D simulation of audio, and there's enormous work our team is doing, where ultimately what we will have right now in Roblox is we'll put a couple speakers up, we'll put on microphones, we'll wire them to the speaker, we'll all be sitting in the back of the crowd, and when we're in the system, we'll both, for those of you way in the back, you'll hear us purely because these are loud speakers, but you'll be able to lean over and whisper to the person next to you, and we want to get that for free as part of the simulation, rather than as something you would hardwire up. So there's a lot of fun work to do there.
Do you think there's going to be, do you envision allowing people to talk to each other in different languages?
Oh yeah, this is just going to, I think we will ultimately wear an avatar and a voice. If we went to the, if Marvel had a Spider-Man avatar, you would get the voice as well if you wanted it. So that's going to happen. You'll be more authentic if you so choose. That voice, from a civility and safety standpoint for younger players, may get understood and even filtered if needed. So, no matter who they're hanging out with, it's, very, very safe to be that way. And I think universal translation will just be part of it. So yeah. Schools will go on field trips to Japan, and they'll hang out and learn about each other.
So this is an amazing audience, and we have developers, content creators, influencers, and so one, big question was also, what is the future of video and live streaming in experience?
Yeah, I'll jump way out to the future, where I think there's an enormous future. I think we can imagine all the things we do that are around streaming, around authoring a stream, ultimately being supported in 3D in addition to 2D, if we so choose. We could imagine a virtual Hunger Games competition on Roblox, where in addition to the contestants, millions of people are ghosting around because they want to watch their favorite characters. We could imagine one of our streamers ghosting around with a microphone, not interacting, but talking about the action of what's going on. We could imagine one of our streamers being a participant and following them in 3D rather than 2D. So I just think we're very early around what it means to be a streamer. As you said that, I forget the character in The Fifth Element, but I would imagine a scenario like that radio host who I think is absolutely awesome, saying like, here's a 3D stream.
Yeah, that'd be very cool. Okay, so we are running out of time, but there are a few more questions. We're barely touching the surface of all the amazing questions you guys asked, so we'll respond afterwards too. But surprisingly, Dave, two more questions before.
Let's go.
Surprisingly, so many people wanted to know about you personally. There's a lot of interesting questions. And I do want to end on a note on Dave.
Yeah, let's go.
So if Roblox didn't happen, what would you be doing right now? What would you do today?
Making a copy of Roblox.
And if you were to build a Roblox experience today, what would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. So there's a bunch of, I would say, really edgy things that I can't share on stage.
He's going to do the 17 plus stuff, okay?
What?
You're going to do the aged up 17 plus stuff. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We could be talking here forever because they all want to hear more from you. But
thank you. Thank you very much. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Please welcome Roblox Technical Fellow Arseny Kapulkin and Chief Scientist Morgan McGuire.
Hello, RDC. We have a great treat for you because I think the first time ever, we have two of the design leaders of the engine to talk to you candidly about the past, the present, and the future. So you all know Arseny. He's now celebrating his 10th year at Roblox. This is the man who brought you what we internally call the second generation of the Roblox architecture. It's what we're running today, and it's what let us get to this amazing scale and all those numbers we talked about this morning.
And I have the privilege to talk today to Morgan Maguire. So Morgan is our chief scientist, and he also now runs the engine group. A lot of people don't know this, but so I joined Roblox in 2012. 7 years before that, where I assume how many people knew about Roblox in 2005, 2006? Is there anyone in the audience? So Morgan was one of the very few people who worked on Roblox almost before Roblox in 2005. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the past, but also really we're going to talk about the problem space and kind of the future that lies ahead, the difficult problems that we have yet to solve without any product announcements. Assume nothing we're talking about on stage is something that actually is going to happen, but who knows?
Awesome. Let's get to it.
All right.
So, Arseny, you and I had a similar experience, have worked, we've been in your seat, audience. Like, we were game developers, and we've worked on many engines, many platforms. What do you feel is different about the Roblox engine compared to engines that you've built games on before?
There's a lot of things. So I worked in the AAA gaming space before Roblox, and before this I worked in the regular non-AAA gaming space, whatever you want to call that.
You were the FIFA guy.
Yeah, I was. Well, I worked on FIFA. But I would say there's a few things that are different, right? So one is, back then, whenever you would build a game, you would always target a small set of platforms. FIFA is an interesting experience because there is several teams that work on it every year. So you have your console generation. And then PC is like an afterthought that's maybe built by the same team. But then you think about, oh, what about the previous console generation? Or the next console generation? Or the handhelds? And it's always a slightly different team, a slightly different game, maybe a completely different game, and a completely different team, and maybe you reuse a little bit of the art assets, right? And so when you guys build content on Roblox, you still have to think about the form factors, right? So that is important. You still, unfortunately, have to think a little bit about, mobile hardware is slower, things like that. But this is not really comparable to the experience that you go through when it's like, OK, you have very, very fixed targets. You have budgets that are, in terms of memory performance, et cetera, that are very tightly bound by whatever the current set of platforms that you care about are concerned, and then somebody else is going to solve the problem for a lower tier or a higher tier hardware. So this is a big thing that is different. And of course, one other thing that's different is when you work with Roblox as the platform, a lot of the things are more intuitive because the low-level details that you never actually want to think about are hidden from you. For some people, it's bad, and I think kind of if you look at our journey, the extent to which we expose different details changed a little bit over the years, but it's still, again, so maybe one example is Roblox client should never crash. Sometimes it does, but when it does, it's on us, it's not on you. This is not the experience that you get as a game developer on sort of traditional engines. That experience is every problem is your own to solve. The engine may have lots of edge cases, and if you hit one, you have to change the content. You can't in some cases, you can't even ask the engine vendor to fix it. So it's a very different stance, right? And it's a very different reality from how the technology kind of abstracts away the underlying details.
Yeah, when you're talking about you can't go to the engine vendor, and one of the things it reminded me of is, so we spend a lot of time thinking about user-generated content, right? Because often in the experiences, the content that's coming in is not what the creator of that experience foresaw. It's, you know, and now with layer clothing, it's really limitless. Just the number of meshes that could be there, the amount of animation, everything we have to stream in real time. And in AAA development, 90% of the bugs were art bugs, right? It was, hey, you broke the engine, please go change the mesh so that you don't break the engine. We're not going to fix the engine. And it's a completely different perspective on Roblox. So everything we've designed, it had to scale. It had to work on any device with any combination of parts and meshes. And that is, yeah, that is such a huge difference in perspective, right? It's the engine's job to be up and be performant and be stable no matter what is sent at it. And I think that's really driven us to design differently than we did in sort of traditional studios. It's really a different medium.
For sure. There's a couple of hard problems around UGC. I think one of them I have a really good handle on, but I wanted to ask you about the second one. So one problem is, as you said, so the content, you don't know what it is. The interesting question is what happens from the behavior and performance and like things like this, what happens from this perspective, right? For us, it's a difficult challenge because on one hand, the system has to try to optimize for like seeing different kinds of content. And then the second part of this is all of the UGC that you can randomly insert in game goes through the Roblox catalog. And that's sort of a filter of some sort, right? There we can ask the question, does the beautiful jacket that you uploaded have like 3 million polygons? If it does, what do we do with this, right? Do we restrict this? Do we like simplify this automatically so that it actually has a chance of working, etc.? But the one interesting problem that we currently don't really solve is the style and aesthetic compatibility. And it's interesting, we talked about this a little bit before, and every time it's like, it feels like an insurmountable challenge. Which is why I want to ask you about this, because if you look at the research around sort of ML and style GANs and stuff like this, like the concept of style transfer, right, is interesting. So let's say I go to Roblox, I upload a jacket, and then somebody has an anime style game. I could wear this jacket in this game, and today you can, and it looks out of place, right, which is cool and fun. I think this is part of the element of like excitement in Roblox, but also it feels out of place. What do we do about this?
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right that machine learning is the technology that's going to solve not just that problem, but a lot of the content creation and content adaptation problems. I was really pleased. So of course, machine learning is behind the facial animation we showed today where we mapped from the camera, but that's in a more traditional computer vision way. So most of the animation is traditional, deformer style animation. It's built on the FACS system. And we're only using the computer vision at the very beginning of the pipeline. But going forward, yeah, I think this notion, which Dave just mentioned, right, in one of the questions about when you go into experience, if the experience wants you to have a thematically appropriate avatar, but we still want to be true to the identity you've chosen, how do we map that? When I look at, so those stats we showed earlier in the keynote of the tremendous improvements we've gotten, for example, in the chat filtering. So we've gotten rid of a lot of the false positives in the chat filtering. That was largely because of machine learning. It was from switching from traditional natural language processing, keyword-based techniques, to what are called these transformer models. They're deep neural nets. And this has sort of taken the world by storm in the last 10 years for machine understanding of text. And that is what allowed us, it was a particular method we called Distilbert, that allowed us to really get much higher fidelity, get rid of the false positives, but also get rid of false negatives.
It's pretty shocking that no amount of regular expressions could solve this problem for us.
I solve everything with regular expressions. This is my go-to solution. And machine learning is the ultimate regular expression.
I guess
it's the learned one. So that success there, and then which we replicated with machine learning for tracking the face, and the voice is part of that system as well. Obviously, content creation is something we think about with synthesis. So you've all seen probably image gen and code pilot and DALL-E and Midjourney and so all these sort of 2D techniques for making kind of faux airbrushed, you know, I wouldn't want to be an investor in a stock photo company today. So we're looking, you know, of course we're looking at that stuff for 3D, but I think the interesting cases are not that end-to-end, but it's what you described. It's the cases of saying, I want to use machine learning in an art-directable way. And that case of, like, what does it mean to put a leather jacket on a bear in a fantasy experience, that's the kind of thing where you've put parameters on it. You're not saying I'm willing to accept any solution. So I think you're right about that.
You have to extract the intent from this somehow. It's kind of funny in the sense, this is what we have been doing all of these years. It's just that when it comes to morphing the content, specifically traditional techniques fail us, in the sense that, I mean, so we don't use the same lighting technology anymore. We don't use the same materials anymore. Now, granted, there weren't like a whole lot of iterations on the materials, because every time we do that, this is the problem that we run into, right? How to separate the intent that the creator had from the sort of intrinsic upgrades to the quality. I still remember, so I was involved in the 2012, I think, I want to say maybe 2013, when we did like a material revamp. And it was interesting experience, because on one hand, you take some material and then you make it look much nicer, and people are like excited about this. On the other hand, they come to you and they're like, well, okay, so there's this material that is called sand. And we used it on our water parts. We painted it blue, and it's now our water. Yeah, we know water isn't sand technically, but the waves look nice. And this is interesting, right? Because it's hard to extract the intent from the final result, right? And separate the things that we can improve automatically or that we can style transfer, right? So what part of my jacket is something that has to be there, versus what part of the jacket am I allowing the machine to sort of take agency of and then just do whatever with?
I think that creator intent concept is actually one of the implicit design constraints of all of Roblox. So you mentioned the materials. One of the things that lets the new materials work is going to let them be, you know, it's all speculative, but you can imagine having objects that can fracture. We're getting a lot more advanced in the coming years on fluid simulation. And so the notions of density and buoyancy and state change, like this kind of matters. The fact that our materials say this is concrete, you've put a complete physically based set of materials on it, but it's tagged as concrete, means that we know your intent. We know what should happen when we upgrade physics, that's not balsa wood painted like concrete in every other game engine, that it really has a semantic attached to it. I think that's super important.
This is actually interesting, because thinking back to the question that you asked me first, there's of course a lot of other things that are like different between traditional development and this. But one thing that's pertinent here as well is the sort of notion of the lifetime of the content. So when you work on a game, you ship the game, you're done. Now this sometimes is not the case, because there's games that also like are updated continuously, right? But for example, the engine version upgrade was always a nightmare on pretty much any project I worked at before Roblox. In fact, even at Roblox, we used when we used Ogre back then.
Yeah.
I remember every new Ogre
you ripped
upgrade.
out my code and replaced it with Ogre.
No, this was before me. Somebody else ripped out your code and replaced it with Ogre, and then I ripped out Ogre. But this is always really hard, right? Because there's this balance between how many old decisions do you leave behind, right? Versus how much do you incorporate them. And so for us, this is also part of this whole story. So we try not to break your guys' game. Now, we still do. And when we do, you tell us about this, and this is appreciated, and we try not to do this. But this is the fundamental difficulty, right? How do we take a game, an experience that was built like 7 years ago? What part of it represents the intent that we can migrate towards the new technology? What part of this is sort of behavior that we have to preserve as is, right? Which is always interesting. We went through this a few times when we did physics engine upgrades, right? And the ultimate goal for us, right, is never to have two engines. It would be really a shame, so like you talk about fluid simulation, right? We have to figure out how do we incorporate all of this into the system that we have without having something where we're like, okay, so if you use the old definition of what fluids are, then we run the solver that somebody wrote in like 2015. And then there's a new one that's in 2021, and there's a new one that's in 2025, and we have all of them running concurrently. Like, we try really hard not to do this, but it's hard to ensure that the content still works, right?
Yeah, and we just approved last week the new aerodynamics and fluid designs internally, and it was easy. I mean, we knew 2 years ago what sort of the first part of aero would be, and sort of static air and airplanes and airfoils and all this cool stuff. And we showed some of it last year at RDC. And the issue, which I think is unique to Roblox, is if we were just shipping Top Gun, the video game or something, we would have been done because we knew what we were going to do for the next year or two. And the Roblox way, though, was we waited, right? We didn't ship anything until we knew what the 10-year roadmap for this was, because we needed to have an answer for, can you have hydraulic machines, right? Can you have ocean waves? Can they break? Can you put a bucket in? Is fire, like, how do we get rid of particle systems and make that unified with clouds in the sky? And I think that's super important. And it gets back to the authorial intent, though, which is if it's real, right? Not just all the graphics tricks that we know, that you folks know, but if everything's grounded in real simulation, then you express what you're doing, and we can make your game better every year for you. And no other engine can do that because it's not real. It's sort of this house of cards and mirrors and smoke that looks amazing, but is frozen in time. And many of my favorite games are getting remastered from scratch now because they have no way to upgrade them.
I think this is the part where there are some things where we do, even though we know they have a limitation, and we know we will break this limitation at some point, but then people start using it. I think there is still the problem when we shipped the first version of glass like a few years ago, many years ago now, like transparent objects behind glass don't render because you have to do a refraction pass, and like there's no way to do this, etc. And some people use it to do hidden object effects, so that you have a part that obscures another part even though it's see-through. We are going to break this one day when we do like ray tracing or something, and we will not feel sorry about this one, but there are some things we do feel sorry about. One thing I wanted to touch on that actually came up in context of the fluid, or like aerodynamics rather, but is a general problem that we have to struggle with, right? So when we were doing, I remember the first demo, the first internal demo of aerodynamics, it's like you have this awesome plane that flies, and then I think Dave, there is a meeting with Dave, and Dave asks the question, which is, okay, this is super awesome. What happens if you have an aerodynamics effect on every single part in the world? Okay, so assuming the code is written correctly, it probably works, but the question is, does it work fast? Is it efficient? We spent like a lot of time in the last few years working on this set of problems, right? But it's kind of interesting. So if you look at the evolution of the macro architecture of Roblox, so way back when, Dave mentioned this, there is like bidirectional replication model. So it's a peer-to-peer simulation, like it's distributed simulation, peer-to-peer model, but anybody has authority over anything, right? So then we have gradually migrated to the world where the server has a final authority on everything, the clients don't. But clients had the entire world. So there is one server, and then there's many clients. Every client has the full world. Then now we are more and more pushing streaming, which you guys all should be using, which essentially says, OK, client has a partial view of the world. But the interesting thing here is there's still one server. It's kind of a fundamental limitation in some sense. If you think about this, we are doing some prototypes and some experiments with, I forget what the production settings are, but like if you have a very large place, it's going to run on like 16+ cores on some machine in a data center. We can go further. We have like 32, 64 cores. But that's still a small, finite number. They've had this picture with like a stadium with a lot of people. And I think he said 50,000 people, 1 second join. Are we ready for this?
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
So this is the upcoming Luau stuff is your personal project, and the 50,000 is mine. And so the first thing is getting to GPU compute in the data center so that we can run Lambdas coming from the experiences, so that we can do big multi-grid simulations like Fluid, but also just to get that compute intensity in the data center. But ultimately, yeah, you can't. The point of 50,000 isn't the number, right? The point is that it's a number that won't fit on one physical server node. And so you have to go to multi-node in the server. And what's really neat, I think, about the Roblox architecture, I mean, this is what I was doing in 2005. It's what you sort of brought us to today at the current scale, and what we're now doing together, is Roblox has distributed physics. Right? Nobody else does this. Now, it creates all these problems with exploits, which we're now backfilling and figuring out what do we do server authoritative, how do we add exploit protection on the client. But it means that we are an engine set up to do distributed computation, not just between client and server like today, but between server and server. And streaming is the next part of that tech, making it so the server doesn't have to have the whole world on it. And so that's what lets us get to these, I want to have things like, the Lord of the Rings orc army coming over the hill. I want to have a music concert. When we start looking at the education apps, it's one thing to have a classroom, but it's another thing to have a whole university or a whole school district all online in the same physical space. And to me, that's the metaverse promise. That's, and games are great, just like books are great and movies are great. I don't think traditional style of gaming is going away. But I think these folks get it, and we get it, that a metaverse app is a different kind of a thing. It's about social. It's about player interaction. It's about identity. And the iteration times are phenomenal. This notion of many of you have 1 or 2 people, and you're pushing out a new build every week or every 3 months for a brand new experience you're trying out. That's unheard of. I'm used to 2,000 or 3,000 person years.
Every day, yes. Yeah. Well, even shipping a game every Saturday is pretty surprising. There's the sort of old game industry, and of course, if you look at some online games, and they also have very, very frequent updates. But yeah, it's a very different world. Yeah, something I keep thinking about is, in some sense, it's interesting how some of these problems they feel very different. So we just shipped Parallel Lua V1 like a month or 2 ago, working on the next thing. But it's interesting if you compare that versus this world with multiple servers. Yeah. On one hand, it feels like a completely different problem. Like, I think an instinct, definitely as an engineer, is like, okay, I know how to do multi-threading, multiple machines and processes. I'm scared. Oh, there's no shared memory space, etc. But
and Parallel Lua was our dipping the toe.
So on the other hand, right, it's interesting how some of these models feel they're not the same, but they maybe aren't like too far apart together. So like, yes, you technically have access from the parallel execution context to everything in your process, but a lot of things are unsafe to do. And so you have to like solve this problem, right? Some things are slower, some things are faster. And you have to understand how you program these like 64-core box, right, in a way that's safe and performant. And some of the lessons actually might apply to the sort of future multi-node. So I'm hopeful that we'll find a way to say, as opposed to just saying, here's like the brand new world that plays by completely new rules that you have never had to consider before, I'm hoping that we will do something that's more smoothly compatible. And in a sense, something similar happened with streaming versus filtering enabled. When filtering enabled shipped, you couldn't change the world from the client. When streaming shipped, you didn't even know about the world on the client. So it feels like some iteration on the same concept to some extent.
Yeah, definitely. And it's important that just like we've always done, this is, as we're working on this new 3rd generation architecture, there's never going to be a version. There's always just Roblox. Everything will always just work. And so these are capabilities that we have to expose in ways that migrate forward. So with that, I just want to conclude by letting you all know. So I'm Morgan on the platform. I'm Morgan at Roblox. You are our customer. So we build this engine for you. We don't build it for Roblox or for anybody else. Let us know what you need. We're here this weekend, but we're always there, and we're about hearing what you need, how you're responding to our features, and then that's really how we invent the future of the metaverse is together, by responding to your ideas. So thank you all very much, and thank you, Arseni.
Thank you.